Hi everyone, my name is Adam Lubito. I'm the programming director and co-founder of Anomaly. Thank you for joining us for today's discussion. We're so excited to be hosting this conversation with Chris Walas, esteemed special effects, a makeup artist behind Gremlins, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Arachnophobia, The Fly, for which he won an Academy Award, and so many more amazing films. Chris also put together Gremlins, the Puppet Story, about the creation of that film's incredible creature effects, and which is screening as part of the Anomaly Film Festival this year. That film will be available for viewing all weekend long through Sunday night, and it's a must-see for anyone with a love of Gremlins, for practical special effects, and I hope you all get a chance to see it. Our moderator for today's discussion is Western New York-based special effects makeup artist Rashaad Santiago, winner of the 6th season of SyFy's dearly missed special effects makeup competition, Face Off. And as a huge fan of both Gremlins and the art of special effects and creature design in general, I am ready to sit back and listen to what promises to be a fascinating, nerdy, and creature-filled discussion. Without further ado, I'll turn things over to our moderator, Rashaad Santiago.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. It is great to be here, and it's great to be opposite of Chris. Gremlins is one of my all-time favorite films, and just the work that you did on that was just phenomenal. I guess I can get started by asking, I guess the question you probably get asked the same thing like me, is where did your love of special effects start, or when did that seed get planted in your head, like this is what I want to do?
Well, I can tell you the exact moment my life changed. You know, I was a monster fan as a kid, a little kid, and that was certainly laying the groundwork for my heading into a career in it. But that was not my intention as a kid until I was, I think, 9. And then I went to my first film I ever saw inside an internal theater, which was a big theater in Chicago, was the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. No, it wasn't Seventh. I'm kidding. It was Jason and the Argonauts. And so that film just blew me away. And at the end of the movie, I remember in my mind just kind of going, I don't know what I just saw, but somehow I have to be doing that. I have to be part of whatever that experience is. And so, you know, that was the turning point. From then, it was kind of like, okay, I got to figure out how this stuff happens and what I'm really looking at. And I just became really fascinated as a young kid and a teen with anything I could find out, which wasn't much back then. There really wasn't a lot. It was basically Famous Monster magazine and not much else. So, but I did kind of start leaning toward the whole makeup thing because there were, you know, a couple of theatrical makeup books in the library, and that was at least giving me something to do. Like familiarizing myself with materials of, you know, that I'd never heard of before, mortician's wax and nose putty and yak hair, and I'm like, okay, this is all like the brilliant horizon opening for me because there's some source material there, and then. And that's just sort of grew. And so I was kind of like a theater guy in high school and college, where I wound up actually teaching the makeup class that I signed up for. So, but there wasn't a lot of film stuff at that point. There weren't a lot of colleges that actually had film programs. So I figured, well, it's time to head out and seek my fortune. So I and a buddy moved to LA. And just kind of started trying to find jobs, and amazingly, I got a job at Disney in Italy, and I only got a job at Disney because I had been unloading trucks at UPS in New Jersey. So UPS is a good company. You're hired. I'm like, okay, great. But the great thing about that was I was at a company that doesn't exist anymore for Disney. It was called Widemco. And they handled all like 16 millimeter and educational media films and film strips and all that kind of stuff. It was across the street from the studio. So we were allowed to go wander the studio as employees. And every single lunch I was over, I'm watching them they're making Pete's Dragon and Herbie that goes to Mars or whatever it was, So I'm just drinking all this stuff in, and I finally just like found this amazing group of artists that would leave the animation building and they'd go out to the back lot, which was still on the studio lot back then, and they just practice their watercolors and all this stuff. And I'm like, going, oh wow, you're really cool. And it's like the woman who inked Snow White, and like historic people. And I'm like, so it was kind of like this wild, just great opening scene for a career in film. It was like just a dream come true. So it went and it went on from there. I quit Disney, and then I took I don't know if it was a full year, but I took a couple of semesters off to take some film classes at LA City College. And then after that, I ran out of money. So gone again, darn it. And so there was back then, it was a pretty famous mask making company, Don Post Studios. They did a lot of stuff for film as well. And I called them up and I said, are you hiring? And they said, yeah, well, as a matter of fact, we're looking for a good airbrush artist. Are you any good with an airbrush? I said, well, I'm pretty good. And and they said, so, okay, can you come in first thing tomorrow morning? I'm like, okay. I hang up. I had no idea what an airbrush was. I'd never heard the word before. I raced to the hardware store and I'm like, you know what an airbrush is? And they go, yeah, I got a little $13 kit here, kind of propelled on a single action thing. And I'm like, yeah, race home and I'm practicing, run out of air and just like, oh my God, what am I going to go up for this test? And sure enough, I go there and they, it was a pretty tough test. It was a color tonal matching 3-color test. And by some accident or miracle, I got a perfect match. And the supervisor's like going, yeah, I don't think I could get it that close, So I got that job. And that was really where I kind of learned a lot of basics about using, latex. And I had used a little bit in makeup and stuff, but really molding, casting, beginnings of sculpting and stuff like that. And that company, as I said, had done some and continue to do commercials and TV shows, some film stuff. So the first film I ever actually technically worked on was Kingdom of the Spiders, because Don Post vacuum-formed spiders that I helped trim out, But that was kind of my way in.
Nice. That's awesome. It's funny that you said that bit at the end there about like not knowing it, but when they give you like this test for when I was doing Face Off or right beforehand, that basically, do you know how to sculpt? You put yes. Do you know how to mold? Yes. Do you know how to run foam? Yeah. I just put yes for everything. And I I did it at the time, and
yeah, you just have to do that sometimes.
You're going to figure it out. When you get there, you're going to figure it out. And actually the first foam latex piece that I've ever applied was on the show. So
oh really?
Yeah. And I knew how to sculpt. I knew a little bit about molding, but I've never applied a foam latex piece before. I did, I watched a lot of the episodes and the series before mine. So I kind of had like visual idea. And they basically they gave us like a walkthrough of the lab, and they showed us, well, here's where, this is, and here's where that is, and here's your kit, and here's everything inside your kit. So I knew the adhesives, I knew the removers, and then essentially all you got to do is glue it down to the person's face. So that first model, they had my very first ever prosthetic.
Yeah, there's your trial by fire.
Trial by fire. But yeah, that's pretty awesome. Like, I know when I was coming up, I didn't have the same thing as you. I mean, I didn't know about colleges or schools or things like that, or people to reach out to get the information. So a lot of it was behind the scenes features of like movies like the Gremlins and, Alien, Predator, Jaws, that kind of thing, just to get to hear, just to hear any little bit of information I could about somebody giving the tips and the tricks of what they were using. But how long were you in the industry or working before Gremlins finally came through? Like
Let's see. Gremlins was oh God, I got 3 years mixed up. I started working in the industry maybe towards the end of 1978, I think, something like that, and then Gremlins was started in September of '82, I think, something like that. So yeah, and so I'd been doing a fair bit before, especially very, very low budget stuff in LA. Did a lot of Roger Corman pictures, which was really, I mean, if there was a real film academy back then, it was Roger Corman's operation, because it was earn while you learn kind of thing, and it was really a lot of making stuff up back then. We didn't have a lot of the formulations that are, or materials even, that are around now. Silicones were still pretty uneven, a lot of undependable materials. It's improved so much over the years, and obviously the information it's out there now. There's, you can get a college education in this stuff on YouTube in a day. It's just, which is great. I mean, it's fantastic, but I'm really jealous because we had to fight for it. But,
yeah, I always wonder.
It's great to see.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I was saying, I always wondered how, because now, like you said, we have everything. There's everything at our disposal, and every month or couple of months they release a new product or something like that that's new and supposed to make our jobs easier. And I used to always wonder, like, how did this work back in the day when they didn't have access to all these? Did you guys in some way have to be chemists and make up your own products, or like how did that work at times when you needed something that wasn't available?
That was absolutely the case. We really had to be a jack of all trades back then. You couldn't just pigeonhole yourself. You couldn't just really just be a sculptor. You had to mix all your own paints and reformulate the available plastics. That was a big one, because the early urethanes were a real pain most of the time. Some of them were fairly stable, but a lot of them were just really, really messed up. They just, very, very big question mark of whether they were actually going to set up ever or not, especially the flexible stuff. And so, yeah, we continually having to reformulate. And it was also one of those things where back then, if you had a week-long schedule on something, you would have to spend half the week at least just driving around getting all the materials. They weren't as easily sourced as they are today. So it was a different structure job back then. And you'd very often get a bad batch of something. It was just like, brand new, I just got the smooth on stuff, and it's goo. It's just goo. It won't set up, and it won't do anything. So it was, there were some trying times, definitely.
Now, did the production or productions, I should say, ever take stuff like that into consideration, or was stuff like that ever mentioned? Like, hey, this stuff we're working with is kind of iffy. So, or was it like you have this window and that's all you have?
That's it. You basically, especially in the low budgets, like we're filming in 3 days, you have $78. Make this. So it was like you wouldn't sleep for 3 days, and then you'd get 3 days off, and so it was a very, very jumbled up kind of scheduling on stuff, because fortunately there was a lot of work that back then. There were a lot of low budget films being made, so you could bounce from one to the other pretty quickly. There weren't a lot of dry spells, so that was a good thing, because it allowed you to actually stock up on materials in between shows and stuff to try and help alleviate that scheduling issue. And as my career grew and I got a bigger and bigger shop, things started getting a lot better. Not just the suppliers were getting more dependable, but suddenly, as my company was a sizable enough company, representatives of chemical companies or whatever were coming to us to say, we have this new material, you want to take a look at it for us? And we were working with Dow Corning on making paintable silicones. And they're like, well, you can't use anything but these specific pigments that are oven dried. And I'm like, no, we're just using oil pigments. We're mixing it in and it's working fine. The pigments, and that's all. And they're like, okay, we're going to work with you guys. Because we were still trying everything. I always insist on, if there's time, test everything to the max. Absolutely test, the materials you're using, test the mechanics you're using, test the puppet or whatever it is, and really just put it through its paces to really make sure you're not going to get to the set and have 5 wires pop on the first shot. So that helped a lot. That really helped a lot, sort of solidifying the process of scheduling, of just saying, well, we have to schedule test time in there. I know it's a tough schedule, but we have to test everything. And that really was a nightmare on the fly, because we did not have the time we needed. We were shooting and we had barely started a lot of the puppets for the end of the film. And they were pretty involved puppets. And so I'm in, Toronto working on makeup and some of the other gags and stuff. And my crew is back in California and they're still building all these puppets. And I'm like, working off of phone calls and faxes, because that's all we had back then, and not even color faxes. Although we did get a color fax in production while we were in production, so that helped. That helped a lot. But what that meant was that the puppets couldn't really be finished. They could only be taken to a certain point, because I wasn't there to say this needs here, this, that, and to match what we were doing with the makeup at the time, because the colors were shifting quite a bit from what we had originally planned. So I had to set up another whole nother creature shop in Toronto for when the puppets finally showed up, and I would be there on weekends and everything else, repainting, dressing, putting all the different loose skins on and all that stuff. So that was a tough one, where we did get a chance to pretty much test everything, but just barely. That was a tough show.
For that shot where he's backing up and he's morphing into the actual fly, did you guys get multiple takes on that, or was that one and dones?
Oh no, we did multiple takes on absolutely everything. Yeah, absolutely everything. Where the head expands and the skin falls off his face and stuff. That was sort of a pre-cut jigsaw puzzle of flesh pieces that I would redress each take. And so it was designed for multiple takes. It was not, one shot, like the exploding head at the end. We only had 3 takes on that, because that was sort of a last minute thing. Did have 3 takes, and 2 of them were good. One was, just smoke everywhere, so that was useless.
Yeah,
do 3.
That's why you do 3. A lot of times I like all the fun things that sometimes are either made up on the spot. With independent films mainly, I find that you get a lot of happy accidents or things that may not go as you planned that turn out working out great. Where for this one project I was doing, one of the squibs we were using just wouldn't go off. It just, for some reason, it wouldn't go off. And I wind up taking just a water bottle and dumping out the water, and then putting blood in the water bottle, and then cutting a slit in the lid, and then just holding my hand up right behind right behind the actor's head, and then just squeezing the bottle, and it looked like a really expensive squib, but it turned out just being a Poland Spring bottle. So
Yeah, I love when that happens. I just love it. You sit there, you finish the take, and you go, "Wow, that looked way better than it had." Then you're like going, "Yeah, I planned it that way."
It's how it was supposed to be, you know. We always have a plan B, you know. That's awesome. Again, The Fly is one of my all-time favorite movies, and one of my buddies out in LA, he actually has um, the I don't know if it's the like a piece of the hand molds, or I think he has Jeff Goldblum's hands with the molds of the fly hands. He showed me one time when I was down there, which I thought was pretty cool. Um, so what was d- did were there, I don't want to say cooler designs, but were there different concepts to what his final look was going to look like? Um,
Oh yeah, lots. Because we had such a tight schedule, we literally had half the time we would normally have had for a film like that. And so we had to come up with these designs really fast. And so I basically got everybody on my crew. I said, start doing designs, start doing maquettes, sketches, anything. We got to just just shotgun these ideas out here so David has a chance to work through this stuff. And some of it was fairly similar, but you have to also realize at this point, we didn't have Jeff Goldblum. We didn't know who it was going to be. We didn't really have the breakdown in the script really well laid out at all yet. This was just sort of like first takes. We got to get a direction very, very quickly. So there were a number of very different concepts. You know, there were some that were very, very insect-like, very sort of I don't know how you describe it, almost shiny shell-like. And I think I did a series of maquettes for the changes, but they weren't makeup changes so much. It was a series of the whole head changes sort of thing, because we didn't really know in the original script, the transformation's a little more vague. And so it was really only through conversations with David and thinking about it that we just had to work with a system that was going to keep Jeff as an actor operable as long as possible. As David really wanted to make sure that the final Brundle booth design could not possibly have been a guy in a suit. He wanted to make sure that it was really a strange, disturbing design. So,
and it was.
Yeah, I thought, that was the tough one. That was kind of like a turning point on that one, because the makeup challenges were pretty hard in the time frame, but still doable. But this last Brundle fly was a big question mark, because I literally was just kind of going, is there any way we can just kind of like work this design into a half person, half puppet or something, like just to make it more feasible to put it together? But there really wasn't. And so we wound up having to build, I think it was 3 main versions of the Brundle fly, which what we call the lumberjack rig, which was the puppet was out here and the operator was back here, and there was a fulcrum here. So he all the major body moves, obviously harnessed in, and then we had a whole bunch of cable controls on it. I went with cables and not radio control, because radio controls were still sort of a little shaky back then. They didn't have the definition in the channels that they have now. And we learned on Gremlins really well that they were not, as early radio control units did not work well in big buildings with all kinds of metal girders in it. There was interference. So I avoided that on the fly and just went with cables for everything. We then had basically a waist up puppet, which was sort of, rotted mechanical arms and The head was puppeteered, but only through an extension. So the operator's hand operating the head movements is really all midway down the torso. So because we just couldn't get somebody far enough up in there to actually just do it as a hand puppet. So that one worked out. That was really versatile. We got a lot of the close-ups and everything out of that one. And then the third one was the what we call the Brundle booth, where he's fused with the door of the part of the pod or whatever. That was an interesting puppet because it was operated through the floor, through tracks in the floor. The puppet sat on a cart. The cart ran on a central line, and then the arms were rotted on either side through 2 more slots in the floor, and then cables running through the main cart. But that was a surprisingly workable puppet because although there were, we had a number of issues sorting out the whole floor thing. Once we got it going, it was pretty darn good. It was pretty impressive. And I remember one of the crew guys who I had not spoken to the entire production. This is very never spoken to the guy once, and he comes over and he just says, "Chris, I have to tell you, all your stuff's been fantastic, but we're just so amazed by that puppet. It's just so lifelike and real." I scored one fan there.
That's awesome. I've always thought that was somebody in a suit.
Nope.
That's crazy.
Nope.
That is just, it's a good bit of information there. It just moved. It didn't move like a puppet. So good job. Great.
Thank you. It's hard work.
Oh man, tell me. I mean,
but,
you have.
As you know, when you're. Sorry.
No. Go ahead.
Okay, well, but as you know, when you're working on this stuff and you're like coming up with whatever it is, the makeup or whatever, the puppet, the creation, and you're like, just all the doubts go through your mind. Is this really going to look the way I think I want it to look on stage, on film? And you get there and you're just like, well, I don't know. When you try to talk to the DP and can you move that one line over a little? And they're like, oh, I'm lighting the scene or whatever. Some of them like so great. And they're like, well, how can I help you? How can I help you? And the others are like, I'm out of my way. I'm lighting it the way I'm going to light it. Right. But
yeah.
Moment where you kind of like go, the camera rolls and you're watching the video and kind of going, yes, it's doing it. It's working. It's pulling it. Yeah.
It's doing the thing you designed it to do. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That is so cool. I think, like I said, Gremlins and The Fly, those are probably some of the 2 movies that I watch the most, like religiously, because they're just very well done, and the effects in them are just phenomenal. Especially with Gremlins. Do you have, I was gonna, funny question. Do you have a count on how many Gremlins you guys actually made for the movie?
I get that question fairly often, and I don't know. I really don't know. But, because what did happen was we had like some half puppets. We had we had a radio controlled gremlin head that was used in 2 or 3 different puppets. It was used in 3 puppets. It was used on the tricycle. It was used on the skateboarder. It was used on the hanging guy in the bar.
On the bar, yeah.
So that head was a separate unit that just plugged into all these different bodies that were rigged for something else. Yeah. So we had to be as versatile as we could there because that was such a crazy, crazy movie. It really was. We had no, half the time we knew some of what we were going to be doing the next day, but not a lot. And we were puppets up literally the day before they were shooting because just changing and growing. And I know we did somewhere between 75 and 125 gremlin puppets. Most of those were pretty simple, but there were some pretty complex ones as well. And there were a lot of sort of single-use ones, which you'll see in the documentary. But we had one puppet that all it did was fling plates, and that's all. They all.
Yeah.
We didn't have it. There wasn't enough of a cheat with another puppet to make it seem like it was going to work. So we really had to get serious about it. And we did a bunch of those, a lot of like one-shot puppets, and it was just because they all had to be rigged so differently. But it was we have what we called the Super Gremlin, which had, pretty sure it was 68 cables coming out of it, and two tubes. Yeah, so that was a heavy puppet. I got to puppeteer that one. That was mostly used for like.
I was gonna say, how many were all of the puppets made from foam latex, or did some of them wind up being like the two-part like expanding foam? I don't know if they had. Did they have the? They had the two-part foam.
I would say the majority of them were the Gremlins, not the Mogwai. The Mogwai were almost all foam latex. The Gremlins were, I would say, the majority of them were latex skins with two-part foam filled. Some of them would be foam. The bodies would be latex and two-part foam, but the face would be foam latex for all the air. So a lot of mixing of materials on the puppets.
Nice. And you get a faster turnaround time with the two-part foam, being able to make more. Yeah. Oh, man, that's amazing. That's just so cool.
One of those things where the closer we got to the production, we knew it was getting harder and harder to make the movie, just because the Gremlins had to be doing a lot more stuff now. Every rewrite was like, wait. How are they supposed to do this now? And a little bit of a panic along there. Literally, when we went down to shoot to LA, my shop was in Northern California. We shot in LA, and I told my crew back at my shop, just keep making Gremlin parts. Just keep making Gremlin parts. Repaint them, send them down, and that's why we were continually building puppets, always.
Don't stop.
Yeah, very, very crazy, very demanding. It was definitely the hardest movie I ever worked on, but it was also fun because it was so freewheeling and just wacko, like really crazy, especially when it was fun with the Mogwai, but we got to the Gremlins and suddenly things really started loosening up, and we were all goofing around a lot more with the puppets and having a much more fun time with them, even though it was still really, really hard. But it was.
That's awesome. With the Mogwai, I don't know the size of it, but it looked like in the movie, it looks like you guys have a larger version of the face for some of the close-ups. How big did you guys wind up going for that to get like saying, okay, this is how big we'll have to go in order to get?
Right. We did have to do that. It was only when Gizmo became a character, because Gizmo was not in the original script. He was not in the first few drafts of the script. It was really fairly late in pre-production, I think it was, that Steven Spielberg suggested to Joe Dante, said, you should have one of the Mogwai just not change it and just be, Billy's friend through the whole movie. And of course, I'm like, what? So the Mogwai go from being just this little part of the movie to having the main character of the film be a puppet. So that I stressed out a bit when that happened. So so I knew that there was no way we were going to be able to carry the the character that far through the film doing that much stuff. So I said we're going to have to do some scale up stuff. So that larger scale puppet is about 3 feet tall, something like that. The head's something like that or so. Very, very, very. And we did a full puppet. We didn't do just a head. It was a full puppet. We, again, didn't know it was what we were going to be doing with it, really.
Gotcha.
So it had fully mechanical arms as well, and hands. I think the feet were just armatured but loose. But we shot a lot with that. I don't know how much of it's. I don't remember how much of it's in the movie, but we did shoot a lot of close-ups.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. That's so cool. This is
Yeah.
like I, I, being able to sit down and talk with you and pick your brain is, like I said, is one of the coolest things. That's why when, Adam had asked me, he was like, "Oh, would you be interested?" I think he said in the email. And I was like, "Hell to the yeah!" Like, excuse my French, but hell yes, because like, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? Especially in my field and in my generation, and that being one of the films I watch religiously. Um, it's so cool. I'm trying to think of if there's any other shots that I wanted to ask you about. Oh, the melting gremlin at the end. How did you guys achieve that?
That was a series of puppets.
Mm,
The I'm trying to remember if we first had like the striped puppet, and I think he starts dripping goo or something that we just had some tubes on or whatever. And then there's a second puppet where he's trying to remember the sequence now. I think it's a hand puppet where we've got him just start melting, bubbling, and all that stuff. And then there's a third puppet that's a marionette, and it's really sort of like slobbering and really deteriorating. It falls in the fountain, and then the sort of skeletal version jumps out, and that was one on a rod, one a marionette, and then the final skeleton melting was cast in just 2-part cold foam for the skeleton pieces. The head was a balloon. We cast up a latex version of the skull, and so the ribs were all on rods underneath the set, so they were just getting pulled down and compressed. They weren't actually melting, but we were, pumping goo and stuff, so it looked like they were melting. And the head actually just deformed, and we just sucked the air out of that, and that was pretty much it.
That's awesome. I always wondered how, because you see these effects where they're either melting wax, like a wax version of whatever it is with a heat gun, and it shows it deforming. I always wondered how you guys achieve that on the show. That's awesome. See,
Well,
I would have
when I
never.
did the melting head for Raiders, that was a totally different process because that was going to be all on screen direct, and I couldn't do a lot of rigging with it, so that was all gelatin, and that was me with gun in front of me and a couple other heaters, getting hot gelatin dripping all over me.
Oh my goodness. That is, I've never really worked with gelatin too much. I've heard so much about it. I think that was one of the options we had on the show, was to be able to use gelatin, but a lot of times you really didn't have time, and especially I never worked with it before, so I was like, I'm not even going to touch this stuff or even attempt to think I know what I'm doing with that, where I'm just learning everything there is to know about foam right now. So
Yeah,
I didn't even touch it.
You do not want to attempt gelatin without like lots of stuff. It can be really, really handy. Really, it's a great emergency material. I mean, I've done full makeups with on the spot with cotton and gelatin, and they came out really, really great. So it's a very versatile material, but really better know how to use it and the temps and all that stuff. So it really takes a little bit of playing around with. I mean, silicones for 90% of what gelatin used to be used for is what's, that's what today's all about. But there are still applications for gelatin, I think. And, it's pretty reliable. That's not,
Nice.
kind of surprised, actually. Because we did all the makeup appliances on the Fly 2 are all gelatin as well.
What? Dude, that's nuts. That is nuts. A lot of the the gelatins I've seen, they come in like these little bars. They almost look like candy. It almost looks like candy the way they come packaged. Um,
I know. We used to
any
get it big tins, like, literally 10-gallon buckets of the stuff. So, yeah.
Did you have to melt it in there?
No. It was
Oh,
it was a powder that you would mix
oh,
with
powder.
water. Yep.
Oh, okay. See,
And that was,
the ones that we see, and they come in like they're already blocks of gelatin, so you just kind of heat it up with water, or yeah.
That's become pretty commercially standard, even for it's in craft stores and all that stuff. You can get it in like tubs that are pre-mixed, ready to heat jelly. But you can still get the powdered stuff, and it's much more versatile because you can really mix your gelatin to the consistency you want. The Raiders of the Ark mix, I had to use a really, really, really thin gelatin mix. It was incredibly delicate. I literally would made the head, and we got down to the stage, and we shot. It was going to fall apart. It's going to self-destruct in another hour or two. So.
How many takes of that did you guys get to do with the head, melting head?
We did one take.
Oh,
I thought it was going to take like 12. We did one quick test of it that was just not a finished head or anything, just an unpainted casting or whatever, just to make sure that the cameras were going to get it and the speed was going to be right and all that stuff. And I just did one, and we shot it, and Steven Spielberg absolutely loved the shot. The whole movie. So okay, I'm done with that one. That's great.
Woo!
Yeah.
Sweat off the forehead, man. I could only imagine. I haven't worked on any major productions yet. Most of my stuff has been indie films, and those are stressful on themselves. So to have somebody like Steven Spielberg to have to try to impress with what you're doing, man, that's taking my metaphorical hat off to you, sir. That's awesome. That's
well,
really
but it's
cool.
funny, you don't really think about it when you're doing it. It's not like that's an added weight, because the job's hard enough in the first place. That's really where you're concentrating. I got to figure this out. Where for my sensibilities, hopefully they'll accept it. But there is always that question mark of, are you really understanding what the director's asking you to deliver? So like, I think I know what he wants. I'll go for this. And sometimes, and every once in a while, there's always that instance where it's the director is telling you what he wants, and it's not what he really wants. Okay, I understand. What you want, not what you're asking.
Because what you're asking is not what you want.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I find that a lot. That comes into play a lot when I'm designing. When the directors, producers, they reach out to you, you do that thing where you design like 50 things, and they still wind up coming back to like the first thing that you designed.
Yeah,
because they have an idea, whereas somebody telling you that idea, you get like an instant like, oh, I know what that's supposed to look like. This is what it's supposed to look like. And I remember I was designing this werewolf for this music video, and they were sending me a bunch of concept art, like, hey, we like aspects of this wolf, and we like aspects of this wolf and this one, and if we can do like a hybrid of all of those. So the very first wolf that I did, they were like, well, can we shorten up the nose a bit? And I was like, sure thing, hack the nose off, do punch back in on the detail. And they were like, okay, well, can we change this? And they changed like several things, and ultimately wound up coming back to the extended nose that I had did the first time. I was like, that's why I gave you guys that, because I knew what you guys wanted.
Yeah, that's really, really common, because they're just you can tell they're insecure about the effect stuff, because they don't really have the feel for it. So they just want to see all their options before they kind of go, yeah, you're right.
that was it. Yeah, your first maquette that you did of the Gremlin is, I mean, I don't know if like the term, like hitting the nail on that, like you nailed it, like right off the bat, like it.
That was the feeling. I'd done just a couple of quick ink sketches, like really just napkin sketches, and just to kind of hone in on the conversation. And that's typically the way I'll work. I'll just kind of go, well, I'm thinking it's something along these lines or these lines, and if they're, if the director kind of goes, yeah, something like that, then I'll go, okay, let me do a maquette, because you'll be able to tell a lot easier with a maquette.
Yes.
So I did that maquette, and as soon as I finished it up, I went, this is going to be a great movie. I loved that design. I knew I go, yeah, that's it. I know this is the Gremlin. Showed it to Joe, and he's going, that's great. Let's go. Perfect.
Let's go with that one.
That was surprisingly little design phase on Gremlins. I think Joe and I, and even Steven Spielberg, who was in some of the early meetings, everybody was pretty much on the same page in terms of the dramatic character of the Gremlins. It was really only a matter of carrying that to the look and making sure the look still had that nature to it, and that weird level that Gremlins has, which is that sort of old movie reality that's not real. Because I could have made the Gremlins a lot more realistic, a lot more horrifying. But Joe really was defining the tone of the film really early on, which was great, really, really helpful. So that's why I could very quickly move to the Mogwai looking pretty cartoony. Honestly, they're that's just, and I was worried about that because they were pretty artificial looking. And I'll never. I was in the theater. I didn't see the film until I saw it in the theaters with an audience, and I was just petrified. I was terrified that Gizmo was going to come out of the box, and the audience is going to go, "What? That's a terrible puppet." I really was holding my breath and everything, and then Gizmo pops out, and everybody goes, "Oh!" And I'm like, "Okay." Yeah, that was a big moment for me.
He's such an iconic character, and he definitely, the fact that it's so weird to hear that he wasn't like included in the initial script. Like, he's somebody who came along like toward the ending, because it's hard to imagine what that movie would have been like without him, only because that is what we saw and that's what we got, but
it would have been a very different movie. Very, very different. Yeah.
I think it probably would have had it has a pretty dark undertone already, but I'm guessing it would have been even darker without Gizmo there, because he
Absolutely. Gizmo's really that sort of balance to all the stuff. If you take Gizmo out, they're pretty nasty, You don't have that, like, don't worry, Gizmo's still laughing or worried or whatever. We're with you, Gizmo.
It's like you don't know where to be. Are there any kind of hints or ideas of them doing a third one?
I think they're so mixed up about that. I know they're doing the cartoon series. They wanted to do a prequel, I think it was, originally with Chris Columbus writing it, but it apparently came out too dark, just too dark. And Warner Brothers said, we're not going to make anything this scary or whatever. So who knows? Give them, eventually they'll get there.
I saw it was a video on Instagram, and somebody had done a dancing gremlin, but it was done all CGI. And I was like, it looks really good, and it was entertaining. I was like, but I really hope that the people in Hollywood don't see this and say, well, this is where the next one is going, because the reason why the first two films are entertaining and enjoyable is because they kept that practical element. That's what I wanted to ask. Did you guys do the stop motion for the first film?
No, that was done at Fantasy 2 in LA. That was Pete Kleinow who did the stop motion work on that. It's funny because Pete actually worked for me earlier on the crew on Gremlins up in my shop in Northern California. And then he went down there and did that. Yeah, those guys were really great. I actually have one of those puppets somewhere. They gave me one afterward. Really good. Double checking, going, Chris, here's here's our stop motion puppet. Is this close enough? And I'm like, oh, God, it looks great, guys. I couldn't believe it, you know? So yeah, no, that was a totally separate unit. They did, I think, I can't remember what, that 40, there were like 40 of those puppets, one guy animating all 40
Jesus.
puppets. That's just really, really mind-breaking kind of concentration. But it worked. A fun shot.
Looked really good. And I like the mixture of that was like one of my favorite things about Gremlins is I like the mixture of the practical effects. Like even with the animated style, like after Billy and his love interest, they run behind the theater, you kind of see like that animated versions of the Gremlins. I love that so much. That's actually like one of my favorite shots. I love that. And you know, all the art forms.
That was Pete Coran who did that that animation. That was it was kind of a weird, funny shot because we were projecting his animation onto the screen, and then I had to get the puppets in there at just the right moment to sort of take over and start slicing the screen. That was a tricky timing on that.
Were you guys on a when they're going down the back hallway? Were you guys like on a dolly with like 6 guys?
We called it the Gremlins Train. It was dolly tracks and two big carts, and I can't remember. There must have been at least 8 operators, and they're all doing that. It was pretty crazy.
It's fun to be on our side of things and to know how certain shots are achieved, and just I always say when I see those clips, I want to see just below that line, that camera line.
That's got to be where the real story's happening.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh man, because it's a matter of, one, this thing has to look realistic, but there's enough motion going on to where we can get away with just flailing our arms and making them as crazy as possible.
Yeah, literally, there were shots that we were just throwing gremlins through the shot. Just keep it moving. Pop them up, bounce around, keep it crazy, and nobody's gonna know.
Man, that's so awesome, man. That is I mean, I know you weren't responsible for Mohawk in the second one, but I had made him for Halloween. I believe it was in 2016 or 17. And the shots where you guys have the puppet, there's like a guy with his hand inside the puppet, being controlled, and then there's like a fake arm, holding the gremlin back. I saw it in one of the shots where I was like, oh, that's easily achievable to do. So I did that, and everyone thought it was a child. Everybody thought I had like a kid in there.
I love that when it really works. We did a baby alien puppet in Enemy Mine, and the studio got complaint about putting babies in costumes. Okay, we did our job then.
Oh yeah, Enemy Mine, man, that was the movie that got me into knowing the difference between like a creature suit and actual like prosthetics. Because the Drac makeup, man, that is probably one of the coolest aliens ever designed, I think. Like, man, there's just so much. There's so like the horn spikes or whatever you want to call them with that like weird sack at the back of the head. It's just like the coolest. It was like one of the coolest things I saw. And then on top of it being just like a really good movie.
That was a fun one. We got a little pressed for time on that one as well. We did not get the okay on that makeup design till 2 weeks before the production started. So fortunately, we had the molds and everything. We just didn't have the okay on. So we caught up pretty quickly, but we were duping molds left, right, and sideways to get the number of pieces together.
Jesus. Luckily, most of the body was covered.
Yeah, right. So we were okay on that. It was just kind of like they could have made the decision a lot earlier on in pre-production and made it a lot easier. But that's all. When isn't that the case?
How many Dracs did you guys wind up making, like, in total?
I think there were a dozen suits. I can't remember, something like a dozen.
Nice.
Yeah, because we had the old Drac and a bunch of background Dracs, and we did a whole bunch of that was the full suits we did. We did a whole bunch of just hands and feet and head masks and stuff for further back that they dress in rags and stuff. But it was, yeah, we cranked out a lot of stuff for that one.
Nice. For the I like the de-aging of the for the child, for his son, what the makeup looks like. What were there any, like, rules or laws about, like, putting children in makeup at that time, as far as, like, what could be done and what was, like, acceptable?
Well, there were in the U.S., but we were shooting in Germany.
Oh,
so,
nice.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Do whatever you want.
Yeah. Well, they were definitely more lax in Germany about it. I mean, there were. It wasn't so much about putting a child in makeup as much as it was about working time for the child a day, which is still kind of the case.
Yeah.
And you had to include your makeup time as part of that work day for the kid.
And that was a full makeup.
So,
did you guys have to figure out, like quick ins and outs to meet that schedule, or was it like a full pullover that was glued at the eye and glued at the mouth or something like that, or was it still individual pieces?
When we first designed the makeup, I can't remember how many hours it took us to put it on, but because it was a lot of pieces, quite a number of pieces. And fortunately, by the time we got to production, we cut down the number of pieces down to like 3 or 4, I think, maybe. And that just, cut the makeup time, in half at least. But it was definitely, that was a huge, huge concern, just in general, because you want your actors to feel as comfortable as possible with the process. And as you well know, a lot of actors are not comfortable with the process. Some are fine, no problem, great, and some are just kind of like, are we going to go through this again? What are you going to take as long as it? You're like, yeah. That really depends on you. You keep asking questions, it's going to take longer.
Man, luckily I've had good experiences when applying makeup. I think the only thing that was like any type of a hiccup was one of my buddies. He's a good friend now. He flew in from Boston, and I told him, I was like, hey, I'm gonna life cast you, up to here. If you need to sleep before we do that, I know you just flew in, do it. He's like, no, man, let's go, let's do it. So you gotta I try to warn him how long it was going to take, and give him the heads up, and he was like he could do it. So I start live casting him, and he just like slowly starts slumping in the seat.
Yeah, and isn't that always a problem when you're taking a life cast? And you tell the person you have to try and keep your face in a position. They're like, yeah, okay, yeah, just do that. And as soon as they get the weight on there, they go, no, sit up straight.
Because we're gonna have to do it again. You're not gonna be happy, man. Yeah. It's always fun. I mean, I've only been doing this for what, I want to say 6 years. Yeah, I've only been doing it for about 6 years. And each project and each new thing that comes across the desk is always like uh boost to the passion and to the joy and to the love of the craft, because this is something I want to do. Like my first inkling of me wanting to do this was the watching the 1954 Godzilla, actually, as a little six,
Oh,
7 year
really?
old boy. Oh yeah. And watching him walk across and destroy miniature buildings was like, I was like, whatever that is, whatever I'm looking at, that's what I want to that's what I
Yeah.
want to be a part of. Um, and I went from there to start sculpting, fabricating things out of anything. At that point, I didn't really know too much about the materials that I needed, so I was making things out of like aluminum foil, hot glue, upholstery foam, cardboard, whatever I could get my hands on. I was fabricating like Alien and Predator and dragons and dinosaurs and anything I could. Um, and then like I said, it wasn't until around face off time that I actually started getting into the prosthetics and the makeup side of it. And then I think after that, after the show, I went back into doing like I did makeups, because makeups are cool, but there's something about doing like a creature or a puppet that's just so, it's, I'm trying to think of the best way to say it. I don't want to say that it's easier, but it's less of a worry, because the makeup has to go on somebody's face. They have to be able to be comfortable in it. It has to look a certain way. When you don't have to cheat those proportions on a puppet or a creature suit, I feel like it's a little bit more freeing, in my case. Yeah.
Yeah, I love puppets. I
Oh
absolutely love puppets.
yeah.
If there's a choice between it being an actor or my puppet would make the it's,
It's got to
as
be a
you say,
puppet.
it's exactly what you're saying. You are not bound by any physical constraints when you design the creature that way, and so you really do have the chance of going a little further afield. The project I'm working on now is exactly the same thing. The clients originally thought, I could do some makeups on people and costumes, and that would be fine. I'm going, yeah, but you're really looking for these fantasy characters, and I can give you a lot more if we do puppets. And fortunately, they very smart people, and they kind of went,
Oh
yeah, this
yeah.
is like really great. So I'm designing some new characters.
That's awesome. Yeah, like I said, when that, and you've been doing this for a lot longer than I have, so I know for you, it it's easier for you to make that kind of decision when it comes down to it. Somebody's going to listen to Chris before they listen to Rashaad. And it's like,
Yeah.
you want to do it this way. It has to be done this way. And they're like, well, I think we're going to go with this way. So sometimes
Yeah.
what I'll do is on my own dime and on my own time while I'm working on the project, I'll do it the way that I think was the best way, just to show them and say, hey, here, take a look at this and tell me what you think. And they'll go, oh man, that looks amazing. Let's do it that way.
You do have to do it, because a lot of times these, especially the producers, just get this idea fixed in their head, and it's not going to work, and I know it's not going to work, but they don't know it's not going to work. They're convinced it's going to work, and you can sit there and tell them it's not going to work because of this. Okay, and
Hmm.
you can't fix that. And they go,
Hmm.
no, I think we're going to be close enough. I think it's going to work. And they literally have to go through the whole process, have it
Hmm.
fail, and they kind of went, that didn't work. You should have told us that wasn't going to work.
Then you pull up a video recording of the exact time and date of when you were telling them it wasn't gonna work.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of times I have that issue is when you talk about taking away from the form, because there's only so far with a prosthetic and a suit that you can take away, or make look really thin, or you know, build up, and with a puppet, you get a lot more freedom with that. If something doesn't have, uh, organs or something like that, you could just completely remove all of that stuff in there and not have to worry about cheating or building off of the human proportion more to make it look like it's hollow. And puppets
Couldn't agree
just
more.
oh yeah. He goes, I was just having a conversation like that yesterday. That's awesome. I'm trying to think. Like I said, you could sit here and talk effect stuff
Yeah.
all day.
I'm gonna break in because this has been such a amazing, entertaining conversation. So thank you both so much. But I want to make sure we let Chris go because I could listen to this all day, but I want to make sure that doesn't happen. But I did want to give you a chance. Are there any final thoughts you wanted to kind of wrap things up with? Either of you?
Practical effects for the win. No, I mean, this has been an awesome experience. Thank you, Chris, for taking the time out from your schedule and your day to allow for me to question, quiz you on your memory skills. And hopefully we could keep in contact after this and maybe perhaps meet in one day and who knows, maybe work together.
Hey, sounds like a promising future there. So here as well, really enjoyed it. So thanks everybody.
Awesome.
Thank you so much to our panelists, Chris Walas and Rashaad Santiago. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out Chris's film, Gremlins the Puppet Story, streaming all weekend long. And we have a great lineup of 14 features and 35 shorts, so stick with Anomaly all weekend long for plenty more amazing genre movies.